Hey everyone, and welcome to my channel. In this video, I will be looking at the premiere episode of Season 4 of Black Mirror. This Netflix show is essentially a thought experiment where creator Charlie Brooker forces the audience to consider the moral implications and unintended consequences that arise with the invention of fancy new technologies in a near-future society. More often than not, the creators behind Black Mirror will subvert our expectations by reflecting a bleak, fragmented vision of the dark paths humanity might take in the world they dream up. Brooker says of the anthology series, "It's like a box of chocolates. We don't know the filling, but we know that it's going to be dark." Anyway, the cold open for the episode USS Callister is a great example of how director Toby Haynes uses visual clues to assist in storytelling and enhance the show's writing, which is already great to begin with. The episode also stands out for its overt references to the original Star Trek and its campy, stylized aesthetic, so I would highly recommend it, even for viewers who haven't yet tasted any dark chocolate episodes of Black Mirror. This video will be an analysis, so it goes without saying that there are spoilers ahead. With that out of the way, let's get into it. In this video essay, I'll explain how the opening scene of USS Callister uses cinematic techniques like strategic framing, combined with the striking vintage tone, and a vivid color scheme to foreshadow Captain Daly's sinister intentions. In this episode, Captain Daly is actually video game coder Robert Daly, an insecure, awkward guy who is unable to assert himself and is disrespected at work despite the fact that he is actually co-CEO of the company.
Sure. What do you want?
Just vanilla latte. Skim milk.
Yeah, good call.
He uses a personal model of the game's immersive VR technology to exploit sentient digital copies of people he feels have wronged him in some way in the real world, acting out his sadistic fantasies in a universe that enables unchallenged male privilege and violence.
Do you submit? Good girl.
In this way, our sense of nostalgia is used against us and warped as it passes through the Black Mirror, reminding us that inequality and sexism are not yet things of the past, in spite of our progress towards modernity.
Your skin is blue. Weird blue alien skin. I know it's up. Almost sort of racist.
The first hints we get that everything is not as it seems aboard the USS Callister are communicated through the camera angles and shot composition that situate Daly as the dominant subject of the scene. Right off the bat, it's clear that our focus is on the captain, as the spaceship doors open, almost like curtains at the start of a play, to reveal Daly centered and framed by the doorway. Haynes may as well be saying, "Here is our protagonist." When a character is placed in the center of a shot, this usually signifies that they are important. Daly is constantly centered in the frame, and the scene seems to revolve around him. Even as the other crew members move about in the frame, the focus remains on him. In fact, his relative stillness draws our attention as it contrasts with the frantic movements of the crew in the background, giving Daly an air of confidence and adeptness. When he does move, it is head-on, straight towards the camera, forcing his presence to take up even more of our attention. Similarly, the more space a character takes up in the frame, the more important he or she is. Throughout the scene, Daly is consistently larger than the other characters, occupying more space in the shot and underscoring their subordination through his relative vastness. Daly's emotions and dialogue are emphasized as we cut between close-ups of the captain that contrast with shots of the other crew members, who are pictured for the most part in long and mid shots. As you can see in these two consecutive shots, Daly's face takes up the same amount of space in the frame as the other characters' entire bodies. This gives the viewer the sense that Daly's authority and significance dwarfs that of the other characters. In many shots, he is seen moving towards the camera to occupy even more space, while adopting an aggressive, commanding stance. The direction of movement in and out of the frame is also significant. In these shots, we see Daly quite literally pushing the female crew members' heads down and out of the frame as he dips them over in a kiss. This is a pretty clear sign of his power over them, and has the added element of sexual coercion, as they are more similar to props than willing participants. To add on to everything, the camera angles at which the subjects are shot make Daly seem to loom over the other characters even more. Daly is shot from a low angle, making his presence seem more imposing, as if the viewer has to look up at him. The opposite is true for the other crew members. In film, when we see a character from a low angle, as if from below, we feel that this person has power. Alternatively, if a subject is shot from a high angle, as if from above, this underscores their powerlessness. Think of a child looking up at a parent and a parent looking down at a child. Relative power is easily illustrated by the angle at which the subject is shot, and director Toby Haynes certainly makes use of this technique throughout the episode. The contrast in camera angle is particularly evident between Daly and the character of Shania. Shania suffers a horrible fate later in the episode, and this high angle emphasizes her vulnerability and powerlessness compared to Daly. It is also hard to ignore the sexual overtones of this positioning, especially given how Shania seems to play into Daly's fantasy with suggestive facial expressions and over-the-top flattery.
It's great decision-making, Captain.
The second element of the scene we are going to cover is the retro tone, embodied in the shameless references to the original Star Trek, which ran from 1966 to 1969. To begin, this scene uses a different aspect ratio than the rest of the episode. The aspect ratio is the way the frame is cropped, similar to how you would crop a photo to be a square for Instagram or a 4x6 rectangle for printing and framing. Only in film, you are cropping the moving images instead of single stills. For this scene in particular, they opt to use an aspect ratio that is quite distinctive from what we are used to seeing in film, TV, and movies nowadays. The ratio 1:33:1 was the same as the 4:3 ratio of old television screens. Therefore, it was commonly used in early TV. This is much more cropped than the wider aspect ratios we see post-2000, which are typically around 16:9. By reverting back to this traditional aspect ratio, viewers immediately sense that something is different. Combined with the effects of editing, the viewer gets the unmistakable impression that this scene is meant to be a throwback to old styles. There is a vignette effect, as well as a filter making the resolution more grainy, with less clarity, that gives the scene a vintage feel. The color also has a distinctly different look from the crisp, hyper-realistic color we see in most film and movies today, along with the rest of the episode. Instead, the colors are more similar to the look achieved through Technicolor film, with amped-up contrast and oversaturated reds and greens. This technique fell out of popularity by the 70s, when it was replaced with more advanced color film technology. However, the look of Technicolor is still easily recognizable today because of its use in famous films like The Wizard of Oz. The final element that confirms the throwback tone of the scene is the mise-en-scène, which brings to mind the original Star Trek TV series. Mise-en-scène is just fancy film jargon for the design of all the visible elements in a scene, including the costumes, makeup, set, and any props. The set design is a clear callback to the USS Starship Enterprise of the original Star Trek, with the colorful flashing buttons covering the control panels and circular spaceship layout. The uniforms are also in the same style, miniskirts and all.
Mini-skirted damsels. A little cold for that in space.
These costumes objectify the female members of the crew, with exposed bellies and thighs, while the men are completely covered and almost rendered sexless by their uniforms. Daly's costume distinguishes him as a person of authority, with its more elaborate design with the shiny red jacket that cuts a broad silhouette, emphasizing Daly's shoulders and making his stature appear more built and athletic. This reflects how Daly would like to see himself: powerful, masculine, and in control. Conversely, he sees the other crew members as objects, pawns in his personal playground created to replicate his beloved space fleet, brought to life not only in the spaceship, but in the way the characters must conduct themselves. Daly is obviously trying to bring back elements of this bygone era, emulating the acting style and dialogue of William Shatner's Captain Kirk.
You have received your orders. You will obey my orders. You will be charged with mutiny.
The values he espouses of honor and dignity are framed within an old-fashioned mindset, where his victims are rewarded for obedience to the regressive social model and punished when they deviate or question his absolute authority. The final aspect I would like to highlight is the distinctive color scheme. This scene uses what is known as a tetradic color scheme, a variant on the triadic color scheme, where three primary colors are combined with a fourth, complementary color. When used in film, such color schemes can seem fun and carefree and stereotypically colorful. This is certainly true in USS Callister. The crew's uniforms in the primary colors, red, blue, and yellow, are impossible to miss as the purple light fills the interior of the spaceship. However, these color choices are not merely a callback to past Star Trek uniforms. They belie Daly's simplistic and underdeveloped view of others, and his dismissal of the real suffering that he puts sentient digital copies through. The primary colors are the three fundamentals from which the color wheel is built. You can probably remember learning about these in kindergarten, and how to mix them to get secondary colors. For me personally, the primary colors are inextricably linked to childhood, and just as the name suggests, are pretty, well, basic. Placed together, they connotate this childlike basicness, loud, unsophisticated, and rudimentary. This mirrors Daly's inability throughout the episode to understand and communicate with others in a meaningful adult way. Instead, he prefers to interact with digital copies in an environment where he is treated with kid gloves in order to protect his own fragile ego. The crew members are reduced to an immature status not only by their cheesy costumes, but in Daly's marked exclusion of any sort of authentic complexity or adult content in his universe. The bright colors signal a cheerful tone, but they also seem gaudy and manufactured. This mirrors the happy front the crew puts on as they play into Daly's fantasy, when in reality, they are all afraid of facing his often violent wrath. At the same time, the purple lighting, besides just looking way cool, situates the USS Callister firmly in the world of fantasy, underscoring that the digital world is totally within Daly's control. Purple has long been associated with the world of magic, mystery, and mysticism. In this purple-bathed world, the laws of nature and man do not apply, and the characters exist within a
bubble universe ruled by an god.
The USS Callister is Daly's fantasy, and the unwilling participants are forced to accept it and play along, lest they be punished by Daly for pointing out the truly nightmarish nature of the situation. Purple also connotates grandeur and power, as wearing the color was limited to the wealthy and royal back when purple dye was extremely difficult to produce, so the color became a signifier between the haves and the have-nots. The inescapable purple glow that fills the ship reminds the crew that they are Daly's miserable subjects. A final thought on the significance of color in this scene, which also relates to the Star Trek source material. It has been a long-standing theory that characters in red uniforms aboard the USS Enterprise were slated for a bad end. Basically, if you had a red shirt on, that meant you were gonna die. This pattern became so recognized that the term red shirt now means a character that is not long for this world. This mirrors red's significance in color theory, which associates the bloody hue with danger and violence. If we apply this theory to the USS Callister, we see two characters in red shirts, Shania and Captain Daly. Not coincidentally, both meet undesirable fates as the episode runs. Besides drawing attention to these two more important characters, the red also foreshadows the bad ends these characters come to. After pointing out the way that the framing, vintage tone, and colors of this scene work together to foreshadow the horror that is to come, there is no way to watch it again without seeing the signs. If we pay attention, all the clues of Daly's toxicity and cruelty are right there, even before we get to the classic Black Mirror twist where the shiny promise of new technology is shattered by the wicked intentions of the twisted people who misuse it. Thanks for watching, and if you liked what you saw, don't forget to like, comment, or subscribe.
You better run. King of space right here.
King of space.